Hi, this is Pam, Pamela Gropey Art, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this poinsettia. This is my practice one. This is on brown craft paper, but we will do it on this white Canson multi or mixed media little pad. See? So today I'm going to use my number 12 flat Donna Dewberry one-stroke brush. This is like my brush I use 75–80% of the time in most of my painting that I do. Alright, we're going to start with the green. I'm going to double load my brush. If you don't know what that means, you can go to my post that is basic painting strokes. And I'm double loading my brush. You notice I have the two colors on there, the dark green and the light green. And I'm going to kind of figure out where I should have drawn in where I'm going to put my poinsettia. So I will put some red out. And it just kind of gives me a guideline. Now I'm putting the red out because the red petals on the one I took a photograph of the poinsettia. I bought a live poinsettia so I could paint from it. It has red bracts holding the petals, or actually they're all leaves, but I will call them petals for this. And I do it in 5. If you notice on a real poinsettia, there's tons more of them, of the petals, but for design purposes we will stick to 5. I should, maybe I'll post the picture I took of my poinsettia that I got for this setup. Okay, so that's where my petals will be. And so I'm going to come outside of that, and like between these two petals I'm going to have a leaf. And I'm going to kind of draw where I want the leaves to start. And I'm going to put my brush down on the chisel edge, lay it flat, pressing down, and I'm just going to follow up. You notice I twist my brush to come to that point. I don't want a lot of wiggles because the leaves on poinsettias don't have a lot of wiggle in them. And I like to do with the dark against the light when I do this next step of my leaves. Many do the light against the light color. But to me it creates its own seam, and when you do the contrasting color. Now it was kind of dry right here, so I'm just going to kind of blend that in. And I was careful not to get two tips, which I do a lot of times. So, and if I wanted to bring a vein in, I could, but I wasn't really particularly concerned about that. Now let's see, I think I want one right here. No, I want it further up, so I won't worry about that because the petals will cover it. So I'm going to go up a little further, and we're going to do the same. No two leaves will ever be exactly alike, and that's good because in nature they aren't either. This one was fatter and shorter, but it's because I didn't have space to go any further, really. And if I were to show you the leaves on my poinsettia, some were shorter and fatter. They're not all elongated. I'm just going over this again because it was dry. It's not unusual for it to get dried out and to have rough edges on paper. If this was a painted surface, the paint would flow just a little bit better. So let's see, that being said, I could do another leaf there or over here, but I'm going to leave it at 2 leaves for this one. Now I'm going to do the under petals because there's going to be a next layer up. And I'm going to do this in the Imperial Red. And the Imperial Red seems to be super thick. Let me see if I can get it up here. Super, super thick. So I add a little bit of floating medium right here to my brush. Not a lot. You don't want it to get, because it will water down the paint a little too much, the opacity. So I work the Imperial Red into my brush. And then I'm not going to start in the center. I'm going to start a little further up. And this might get on that green, but that's okay. It looks like it's mostly dry. And I'm going to make these, try to make these pretty long petals, because I'm going to have an upper layer. So now it's pretty dry on that edge, as I said, typical of on paper. And if it really bothered me, I'd come back with a liner and go back over it. And you notice I'm not too wiggly. I'm just kind of waving the brush to give the petal a little shape. Now, believe it or not, my petals of my poinsettia are pretty round. So, and fat. So I'm not too worried about it being a particular shape. Obviously, different ones have different shapes. There, you see how I went over that and cleaned up those edges a little bit? So then I'm going to start on the next petal. And again, I'm going to start a little ways up. And I kind of 1, 2, 3, kind of get that paint flowing off the brush. And I kind of want to keep the petals about the same length. Might have got that one a little too wiggly, so I'm going to clean up that edge, make it less so. Now, one thing about the way I paint, I'm not into perfection. I'm going for an impression of something, and I let the mind take over. I know in decorative painting many times it's very precise and controlled, but that's not my style. So, and it works. So here, the third petal. And you notice it's going to cover up quite a bit of this leaf. I didn't get far enough out there, but it's all, it just sets it to the back of the petals, which is what I wanted. Now, most red colors are not very opaque. They take some work to get them opaque, so don't stress about it. I'm going to go off my thing. This is actually kind of a small pad of paper to do this on, because my poinsettias, these are large. I'm doing it with a larger brush. I could do it with a smaller brush and make them smaller in size if you had like a card or something you were painting them on. This is just to show you the technique. I could have used a 10 or an 8 brush, made them smaller. So I'm just pressing. I do 1, 2, 3. It kind of gets this paint flowing, and then I'm just wiggling out. I'm pressing, dragging, and then I turn the brush with my fingers. I twirl my fingers, and that brings it to a point. So I'm going to do the same over here. And with this one, I just did the one color. I could have had a second color with it to make it have some different effect, but it's not what I wanted for this one. So now I've got to let this coat dry, and then I'll come back and see whether I think I need to add some more. I've got 2 tips there. Let's show you how I fix it. I just kind of come up and fix it. Or, you know, you can also do that with a liner and make it have a tippy point. But like I said, I'm not a big fusser over things being perfect. And in the overall design, those little imperfections kind of get hidden in the composition. So there we go. I will dry this and then I'll come back. So that's dry. And that was the, what was it? Imperial red. But this one, I'm going to go over it with another red, which is the engine red, and I have it on my palette. I'm loading my brush just with the engine red. The engine red has a little pinker of a tone to it, and I'm just going to go over it, and it will brighten up that imperial red. When the imperial red dried, it wasn't exactly the color I wanted, So never be afraid to go over your painting if you wish. Now that leaf, so I'm going to go over this one. Too. And it kind of creates it, makes it more opaque. And I'm not super careful to be exact. I try to get within the lines. Go over this super little one. And with this, I'm not turning the paper because I don't really need to. Just to get in. And that one I didn't get completely over to the edge, and that's okay because when I go over this one, it does it. So there's that petal. And you notice, let me turn it. This is not perfectly symmetrical. Every petal is the same. It's close. This one would have been a little bit bigger if I hadn't been constrained by the top of the pad, but that's okay. Every one will be different. And if you could look at my poinsettia that I have painting from, you will notice that they aren't symmetrical either. In fact, they're on different layers going down the stem, and so it gives them a totally different look and size according to perspective. So I'm going to dry this, and you know, maybe I'm not. I will just go ahead and see how it's going to work going right over top of it because the under layer is dry. Now I'm putting some berry wine on my palette paper. One moment. Alright, I have the berry wine on my palette paper, and now I am double loading with the Indian red. I guess I can show you that. It might be a little blurry because different level at the camera. Berry wine, Indian red blend together. Now the berry wine is going to give the next level of petals some real definition. And I don't want it to be too wide, so I'm going more into the Indian red than I am the berry wine, or at least trying to. So these are going to actually come right between all of these petals. So there's the little stem. And they're a little bit, the stem is a little bit shorter than on the upper level. So 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to come right up between those two. Now you could do this if you feel like you're getting your petals too big, too fat. You can go down to a number 10, and it probably wouldn't hurt for me to do that because I get a little heavy-handed. But I'm just going to work with the 12 for now. So there's the first upper petal, and then the next one will be right here because there's that, it's supposed to be the stem. So we'll go right there. I'm trying not to be too wiggly, make it roundy, but habits die hard, and I'm used to doing a lot of wiggles. And we'll just keep going. I will turn so that I feel comfortable. That one didn't have quite enough berry wine on it, so I'm going to go back with just berry wine. But this petal will kind of cover it, so it's not imperative that I go in and fix that. So, next one. Got a little too much Indian red on that one. If you get a little bit too much, just dot it off, like tap it on your palette paper, not necessarily on your drawing, but that one, I got a double point. Alrighty, one last petal. Then we can add some details, final details, okay? So there you have the upper petals. And you see how the berry wine really stands out against the edges there? I'll show you another little trick, because these ones don't have that definition. And I didn't want the definition underneath the top petals because it would have muddied it up. But if I wanted to add it now to the edges of the bottom ones, I would just see I have berry wine and Indian red, and I'm just coming along, starting from where the end of that one was. And I'm only adding it to the edges up here, above those petals. Now that's totally optional. You don't have to add it. If you think the bottom petals are just fine, like this one I didn't. See the bottom petals, and then the top petals had the berry wine. But it isn't something you can do if you think it adds a little something that you might feel is missing. And if you want to add like a vein, you can just do a very light vein. And so it's just those little things that can add a little something to your painting. So I'm not going to do them all because you get the picture. You get the idea. Now in the center here, we are going to take, and a lot of times I say this, I use a stylus, I can use the tip of this liner brush, or you can actually use this end to create little dots. I'm going to put some thicket out on my palette paper. Now I'll do this, I'll do it with a tip, and I'll show you. I'm just going to dot the end, and I'll kind of dot it off on my palette paper to see what kind of a shape it's making. And I'll get a little bit more on, and then I'll do that dot, 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 dot. That last one didn't do what I wanted it to do, dot. So you see where we're getting the dots in there. So we will let that dry because we're going to come back in with a little bit of red or a little bit of something. Now on my original practice, I had some of the citrus green right in here, and I didn't do that this time, and I'm regretting it because that really seems to add some dimension. So I'm going to take this liner brush and I'm going to get a little bit of citrus on it, and I'm going to kind of bring in some little bit of that color between. Because if you look face down on the top of a poinsettia, you can see the green bracts that are down below. And it's not like white, it's the green. So there, the light green in there really adds something. And then when we come back with our little bit of yellow, which mine has some yellow on top of the green dots, my poinsettia, and then also some have the beginnings of more bracts or flowers, which is red. So I'm going to let the green dry just because it'll start muddying up if I don't, and then I'm going to add that last little detail. And if you want to add other details, maybe like some kind of fronds, let's just do it for fun while we're waiting for that to dry. I'm always playing around with my designs. So I've just taken my clean number 12 brush, working in some thicket, and on the chisel edge I make sure it's good and sharp, and I got green on my finger. And you can come in and maybe right here, let's do it right here, just kind of make some streaky fronds. Let's do it over here too. Well, let's do it out the leaf. But see, it's getting where it's too thick. I've lost my chisel edge, so I'm going to work some more paint in. Make sure my edge is a chisel. Very lightly streak. Now I'm just running it and flipping it up. So there we have some little fronds. And then we can come in and make some berries. And I'm looking for a brush that has a big fat end that will make berries. And let's see, this one, I think this is the number 12 end, and I will dip it in the berry wine and then dip it in the red and just kind of make some fun berries. Now that one needs to be a little bigger. I'm dipping in the other red, trying to get it to fill in. So these make really easy little berries. You can add, oh, got that one kind of goopy. Nope, that one was not goopy enough. Okay, some little berries. And when you can let those dry, then come in with the lighter red and kind of highlight on them. And that just adds some extra dimension. So I think my green is dry enough, and I will get some yellow. Well, you get the idea of the yellow. I'm just going to go ahead and do some red with my liner brush. So I want a bright red, so I'm going to go with the engine red. I'm out of it. Well, maybe I'm not. Let me see. Oh, I got a little bit on my palette paper. It's getting kind of dry, so I might be pushing my luck here. But then you just tap it in the center of the dark green. Now, it definitely needs the yellow to make it pop, so I'm going to get the yellow. So my camera shut off on me before I got the yellow in there, but all I did was take my liner, dip it in some yellow. It was a daffodil yellow, and I tapped it in there alongside the red. So there is your poinsettia.